name is Jessica Sands, and today I'll be presenting in-class versus online learning if it benefited or harmed the students that had disability of the COVID-19 case. My statement is about the special education department and within the teachers and the students on how they struggled throughout the pandemic, on how they had to go learning at home. The COVID-19 was an unexpected case and it closed schools down, which therefore it made the faculty and the students learn at home. To begin, I will discuss the problems the special education teachers and the students had to go through. For both the teachers and the students, they both were unprepared. They weren't expecting to work at home, and the students weren't expected to learn at home. They had also problems with technology along with the internet access. The problems the teachers had is that they didn't have any direct instructions along with their environment on how they weren't used to being in their classrooms. They had to set up a place at their home to be able to teach their students. They struggled with the grading because the academic was important, but the important was making sure the students were comfortable because they weren't used to being at school and they were having to do school at home. The teachers also struggled through making sure they were put through extra time because they wanted to make sure that each and every single individual of their students with disability were at comfort, and if they needed help, that the teachers were there for them. The teachers also had took extra time to modify the students' work. Therefore, they would make it a little bit easier for them to adjust with the technology and with their schoolwork. They had a hard time working one-on-one with them through the screen because throughout their whole years, they're all used to being in person, showing them on the table and pointing where they want their attention to, because students with disability might have attention span on trying to focus on what the main goal is. The teachers also struggle with IEPs, which were goals for their weakness and strengths on how they were progressing or not progressing. They had trouble with IEPs because they didn't know if the students were doing their actual work. The next section of how it was affected was the sources I used was Shook and Tugan. What was affected was that students didn't have the motivation to work at home because they weren't used to it. They were used to being in the classroom and the teachers positively encouraged them to do their work and motivated them and give them rewards, while at home they didn't have any of that stuff. They had their routines messed up, which students with disability, they like having routines because they like knowing what comes next and they don't like not knowing what's unexpected. The students' parents were not trained on how to help benefit them with their schoolwork, and which stressed the students out, it stressed the parents out, and it stressed the teachers out because the teachers wanted to do all they could help to help them. There was also maybe students with disability, maybe their parents weren't even at home, and they were having extra problems because they didn't have the support system as well. Teachers were affected as well because they suffered through the stress of not knowing if their students were getting the help, as much help they needed or not. They also questioned their own self because they didn't know how to account the students of the accountability on how the whole situation was of moving to online, moving to at home, and not going to school and not seeing all their friends, and which caused them to just stress out. The next thing would be the consequences, which the sources I used was Gata and Shook. The consequences is that if they would continue online, they wouldn't have the correct comprehension because they didn't have the motivation and they didn't have the proper instructions on how it's taught in person. The disability students would also have a consequence of having mental health issues because they're used to being able to talk it out with either the counselor or their special education teacher. They would have social issues because if they were at home, they wouldn't have anybody to talk to besides online, and it's very different from talking to someone online along with as in person like they do in school. They have challenges of behaviors. Students with disabilities can have a cause of behaviors and can cause making it worse at home because they're stressed out and they're not comfortable because they're used to that routine of having in school class and having all their stress relief either from PE or music or other activities that they like to do. Next, I will discuss suggestions on solving the cause problem. A solution I would use is using the class management a teacher would use in class at the school as much as I could in online for the Google Classroom. Along with academic skills, I would try to convert the academic skills I used in class to online as much as I could in order for them to be comfortable in their new environment of being online. My next section is about explaining. The sources I used was Krause. The explanation was that it was tough on the teachers, the parents, and the students because of communication. The special education teachers were communicating as much as they could to help the students and parents out at home. The problem that would be solved is to keep communicating with them and ask them what all the help they would need to get to satisfy their needs of making sure they're comfortable. To make the students comfortable, I believe that even if they needed help with schoolwork, I believe that they could also just help with just talking to them, because students with disability need that extra venting to help them work out situations, especially because they didn't have PE or music or any of that stuff online that how they do in school. It would help them talk it out if they were talking to their special education teacher, because that specific teacher might know what they're going through. The actions I want to talk about is to think about the future for the kids. Think about how the kids and teachers, they're all used to teaching in person, and it was very different for online. And how they were helping students online. They did as much as they could, and they developed motivation to focus on using their skills, either by they could have had games on how to study, and to think about how much teacher work that they have to do for the students of because some special education teachers have more individual students than the general education classes. My next thing I want to talk about is how, considering the mental part of the students' issues because of how the change is. And I want to talk about how the problem with virtual learning. It's very different because students with disabilities have that specific routine. That routine helps them calm them down because they like knowing what's next. Meanwhile, at home, it's hard for them because maybe they can do whatever they want, but yet at school, they have those rules. They have that set routine on what they're supposed to do. And if they did not have those rules, then it would be out of control. Therefore, I believe it would not benefit the online for the students with disability. Yes, I understand how the pandemic was an unexpected case. However, now that we were able to come back in fall 2020, we got to use masks and we got to use shields. Therefore, it helped our faculty along with the students. In conclusion, special education teachers and students with disability struggled through the 2020 COVID-19 emergency online learning when they had to go virtual. Thank you for your time.